Hi, and welcome to Coaching Voices Podcast. I'm Pravin Sharma, an executive and leadership coach and consultant with over 2 decades of experience in the industry. I truly believe in the transformative power of coaching and the profound impact it can have on people's lives. In each episode, we dive into candid conversations with seasoned coaches, exploring what coaching really is and whether it's the right path for you. Together, we uncover how you can unlock your full potential and step confidently into leadership roles within your organization.
Today's guest is none other than Diana Peterson-More,
A visionary leader and a strategic problem solver whose mission is to transform organizational performance by unlocking the potential of people. Diana is the founder of DianaPrestonMore.com, specializing in creating high-performing teams that align with organizational goals through strategic planning, tailored coaching, and impactful training programs. With a proven track record of helping CEOs, COOs, and CAOs turn underperforming teams into motivated and engaged workforces, Diana's expertise lies in addressing workforce challenges, team building, and creating actionable roadmaps for sustainable growth. She's also an accomplished author and corporate trainer, offering dynamic workshops, both virtual and in person, that focus on strategic communication and leadership development. Diana's unique approach blends vision with practicality, helping organizations drive results while fostering a thriving culture. In this episode of Coaching Voices Podcast, we'll dive into Diana's journey, her strategies for transforming teams, and how she empowers leaders to lead with purpose and impact. Whether you're a business leader, a coach, or simply someone passionate about personal and professional growth, you won't want to miss this conversation. Hi, Diana. Thanks for coming to our Coaching Voices podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing super well. And you?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for asking. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey into coaching? What inspired you to become a coach?
Okay, very briefly, I am an employment lawyer by training and profession. And at least in the Los Angeles area, most employment lawyers hold the big HR jobs in big companies. So I kind of followed that route. I was a practicing employment lawyer. I moved from employment law to employee relations to human resources and took a couple of other jobs along the way. And I've always been an observer of people, and I am also a very practical person. So when I left Times Mirror, my last job was head of the human resources function at Times Mirror, which was the enterprise level that had newspaper group, training companies, TV stations, radio, book companies, magazine companies. And when Times Mirror fell apart, I thought, well, I'm going to get my consulting chops on. I'm going to consult for about a year, and then I'll go back, take that one last big corporate job. And I didn't. The rest, as they say, is history. So I became a Zanger Miller. Zanger Miller was one of the 3 training companies, a Zanger Miller trained facilitator, which I loved doing. I love bringing people to their aha moments. And I was doing a lot of facilitation, a lot of strategic planning, and one of my clients asked me if I could coach. And one of the things that I learned in my business is to say yes all the time. So I said, yes, of course I can. And it was what happens all the time. I'll get a call from an organization that'll say, so-and-so, Juan has all the technical tickets, he lacks people skills.
Right.
That's the main theme, because obviously if somebody lacks technical tickets and people skills, they're no longer employed. I, having actually administered and taken 360 performance evaluations, saw the value in those. It really caused me, it was a motivator for me to grow and change. So I thought, okay, what's coaching about? It's an assessment of where you are today, where you want to be, kind of a gap analysis, and then how do you get there? I'm a totally pragmatic, practical person. So for me, I would start by doing a 360. I would then debrief the individual. We would then meet with the sponsor, which is typically somebody in the organization, after we
Right.
compiled a list of this is what we're going to work on. And that person would say, yay, nay, add a few things, take off a few things. And then it's kind of like plan the work and then work the plan.
Yeah, yeah.
And we would go through and have coaching sessions. And again, I'm extremely practical. So, the 360 I use, there's a statement that says, my boss gives me feedback. And what I would hear consistently is, well, I always know when I screw up. I never know when I do well. So a homework assignment would be, don't be phony, don't be fake, because people can smell a rat a mile away. But certainly within a course of 2 weeks, let's say our next coaching session was in 2 weeks, there's someone you can thank for having done something nice and beyond the call of duty. And there's somebody you can give an attaboy or an attagirl to who's done really exceptional work. And it's amazing how powerful those simple acts are, because not only does it encourage the person who's receiving them, the person who's giving them starts to think differently. So instead of looking for people to screw up, they're looking for people to succeed. So that's kind of an example. And after I started this process, interestingly enough, I thought, well, I'm a woman and I'm a baby boomer professional female, and surely I'll be coaching mostly women. Well, as it turns out, I coach mostly men, often in the finance area, which is not my cup of tea, but individuals who are excellent at what they do, but haven't been in situations where they were required to develop people skills. So that was kind of my journey. And now I've been doing it, and I've seen the success of having done it and the power of having done it. And, knock on wood, I've been around long enough that most of my business is repeat business or referral.
I'm very glad to hear about your referral business. Matter of fact, referrals are one of the ways for coaches to sustain their business by getting a client in the regular basis, for sure. Now, you talked about the 360 evaluation. For instance, if somebody comes to you from an organization, you do that 360 evaluation. Does that particular assessment can be shared with the manager? It's strictly confidential.
Thank you for asking. Excellent question. Confidential.
Okay.
What I would say is, okay, it's your information. It's up to you if you want to share it. And pretty much I found that people want to share it because in that portion where you're sitting down with the sponsor, and I call whomever it was who called me in, it could be HR, it could be a line manager, it could be a CEO, as the sponsor. It's from the feedback from the 360 that the individual will develop his or her list of what they want to accomplish. So I'm pretty upbeat about it. I always say what's working, what's not working. I always give people the positive first. I always give them kind of an Excel spreadsheet with the numbers, and I'll say, what positive attributes do other people see in you that you can use to overcome some of these delta deficiencies? And so if someone's sitting down and says, I want to cultivate better relationships with my peers or colleagues, one could extrapolate that peers and colleagues, for whatever reason, kind of downgraded the individual. But sometimes they're willing to share specific comments. In fact, they frequently are. And equally, by the way, when I'm talking to somebody, I'll say, oh, I noticed you gave Maria a 3 on communication. What were you thinking about? I kind of pull the onion back. A number's a number. It's like going to school. You get a number, what does it mean? But I'll look for specific examples. And then I will say, boy, this is a powerful example. Would you give me permission to share this specific example with Maria in this case? And 9 out of 10 times they say yes. So, but if they say no, I honor that, because the goal is to be transparent, honest, and give really grounded, fact-based, I always say fact-based examples not opinions. I'm a
Yeah.
big, acts, facts, events, not conclusions, not opinions, not attribution of motivation. To say so and so was unprofessional. Well, what does that mean? You have to get to the specific conduct because people can change their conduct.
Right.
They can't really change somebody else's opinion of them. I mean, they could ultimately, but how do you do that? I mean, how do you change someone's view of you if you don't know what conduct you're engaged in that is either acceptable or not acceptable? So that's, that's a little diving in. So you're correct. There has to be confidentiality. And what happens to me sometimes, the sponsor will call up and say, well, tell me blah, blah, blah. And I will say, remember that first meeting we had? And I mentioned that it was confidential and I'm not at liberty to share that information. However, we can sit down with Emil and he may be willing to share that information with you. I would certainly encourage him to do that. And
Right.
it's important to
Right.
maintain confidentiality.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's also unethical to break that confidentiality for sure. Now, can you share some of the inherent challenges you faced during your initial breakthrough and how you overcame them to establish yourself in this field?
Well, I had devised this process that I was going to follow, but I didn't know whether or not it would work. So it was a little bit of a leap of faith. I was pretty analytical about it. I did say, wow, you have to say, where is someone today? Where do you want them to be? And how do you get there? But the 360 piece of it was based on my own experiences. I've given them, but I've taken them over my career and I'm living proof that you can change other people's perceptions of you, but you have to change your conduct sufficiently or decide that you don't really care and you're not going to. So for me, it was very important to have that piece. 360s are very threatening to a lot of people. It starts out with self-assessment and then whomever your boss or sponsor is, then your peers and then your subordinates. And it can be shocking. I mean, I kind of find when I'm debriefing people, I always have Kleenex with me, and this is men and women. And they will often say, well, I know who said that. And I know, and I'll listen. And then I'll say, it doesn't really matter who said it. The fact was it was said. So what do you want to do with that information? And they kind of go through this whole process. It's a little bit like a book that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote on death and dying, which is kind of hurt and then anger and then finally acceptance. And I've pretty much everyone I debrief with goes through that. And I understand because I've been there. I've taken 360s in my career and I remember how shocking and how hurt I was the first time. But then I also said, okay, what are you going to do about it, Diana? You're the only one who can do something about it. What are you willing to do to make this happen? So my fear was, is this process going to work? And the answer was, yes, it did work.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I actually, because of my background, and I do a lot of the sexual harassment prevention, anti-bullying, anti-gender identification bias training, and I do a lot of investigations, and I serve as an expert witness. So the way I go about it is I do with numbers. So if it's a 360, I might say, well, I spoke, I don't know you from Hot Rock, basically.
Right.
I talked to 9 people, and 7 said X and 2 said Y. So when somebody sees that, they begin to realize that, maybe something I do causes people to think that, because again, it's not reality, it's perception, and perception is reality, in these cases. So yes, it's so ironic. I have to say, sometimes I've met people and I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be like pushing a boulder uphill. This person's never going to change. And the person changes. Then I start an assignment where I think, oh, this is easy. There just needs to be a few tweaks here or there. And the person's very resistant to making those tweaks. And so, what I will say to people, by the way, because again, I get contacted mostly by organizations, not by the individuals themselves. Although I recently did a training on conflict management and one of the people asked me to be her coach, but that's unusual. So what I always say is this isn't inherently right or wrong or good or bad. It's this organization saying for you to be successful at this organization, these are the things you need to change. And you may decide not worth changing. I'll take my marbles and go someplace else. I'll get another job.
Right.
And so for me, it's about empowering the other person. That person is in control of his or conduct, whether or not he's willing to change that conduct and whether or not he's willing to try new things. And that's not my decision. That's the decision of the person. So I'm very much about giving them control. So when I start the process and I want to do a 360, I have that individual send a note out to say, oh, I'm meeting with a leadership coach, Diana Peterson-More, and I'm going to be part of a 360. I'm going to interview myself and then so and so and so and so. And I would ask you to be interviewed by her and to be open and transparent. It'll be a confidential conversation, but I'm really eager to hear the overall perceptions of my conduct at work. And by the way, I don't use the word behavior, which is my labor law background, because behavior's subjective. And whereas conduct is you either did it or you didn't do it, so I get really down to brass tacks. But I'm also about letting the person not be a victim to the process, but to be in charge of the process.
Got it. Okay. All right. Do you still practice your labor law, or you're kind of like away from there?
Well, once a labor lawyer, always a labor lawyer. I think like a labor, I think
once
like
a coach, always a coach too. So that's
yeah. So I think that way, and I think strategically. I mean, I think about what's the other person going to do, and how do I outsmart them? For instance, when I serve as an expert witness, I have my deposition taken or from a report. I don't have extraneous materials. I don't keep a lot of notes or anything because that's all discoverable. And the other side gets very frustrated. What I do is I have terrible handwriting. So I interview people, I type it up. And when I'm making the report, I just use that as the basis and add or subtract or draw conclusions. Is that being a labor lawyer? Yes, absolutely. Or when I'm having my deposition taken, I know all the hedge words to say. It's fun. It's kind of fun, actually.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's you start your career as that. It's very hard to let it go, anyways. I mean, why not? Why not? Why should I leave something that kind of thing? Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna pivot a topic a little bit here and then talk about qualities. Right? What qualities do you think are essential for somebody who is considering a career in coaching and expand the horizon for himself or herself?
Well, this is Diana Peterson-Moore's view, not everybody's, but I really believe you have to have been there, kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt, wore it, ripped it up, burned it, whatever. So for me, as a workplace coach, it was important to have been in the workplace. I know there are a lot of people who are mental health individuals who are moving into this realm. To me, that's a different take on things because without having been in a workplace organization, there's a lack of understanding about how organizations operate. So for me, it needs to be somebody who's been there, who's done that. For me personally, I started out and moved all the way, as I'm fond of saying, I made a meteoric rise to the glass ceiling. My last corporate job, there were 18 officers, 17 men and me. So I've lived a lot of what's happening. So when I'm talking to people, I've been there. I'm not just telling them something that I read in a book. I'm giving them
practical experience.
Yeah, practical experience. So to me, that's very important. It's not to say that there are not very many successful coaches who have different backgrounds, but so I would say that. Also, being observant. I mean, I've always been a people watcher, and I've always been interested in what motivates people. And now, because of, having written a couple of books on communication, I'm very focused in how we communicate with one another, word choice, responding to the lizard brain, meaning, if one has an emotional response to kind of take the famous 15-second pause or not respond right away. So it's really just a lifetime of me, both as an observer of people and my own career, and being fascinated by we human animals and how we operate in the world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I believe there are two ways to get that coaching crown in your head. One, by going to the certification schools that provide the coaching. Since the coaching industry is not regulated, I believe that you can call yourself coach without going to any kind of industry or getting any kind of certification or education for that matter. Now, for those who became a coach either or ways and struggling to find the clients, what advice you have for them?
Great question. I've distilled it into four components: marketing, sales, delivery, and follow-up. Marketing is all the networking that you do. Sales is closing the deal. Delivery is doing it. And follow-up is looping back. I'm really good at the first three. The irony is my weakest link is a follow-up. And yet I've been around long enough that all of my business is repeat business or referral. But the marketing piece, people have to get to know you. There is a model that says know, like, trust, refer. And if you just hang out your shingle, why would they choose you over somebody else that they actually know or have met? So networking is key. And interestingly enough, I was a woman architect found me on LinkedIn. I did a training session, and then I was invited to come to a women's architect event and talk about starting my own business. And so I did the marketing, sales, delivery, and follow-up. And apparently this was a huge conference at the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood, which is Southern California. And when I said networking, they were all nodding. And apparently that theme just kept coming out almost in every session they did. But that's critical. If you don't know people, how are you going to get referrals? How are you going to find people? And if you just hang a shingle out or a virtual shingle and there's 25 people, how do you distinguish yourself? And the marketing piece can take a while. The networking piece can take a while. And some people have to be able to plan their lives accordingly. I mean, like if you get a degree in anything and here a coaching certificate, but you have no money to live on, you're going to have to do something else while you're starting up your coaching practice. But, for me, it was being very practical. How much money do I have? Do I have to live on? How do I expend it? How do I, there's that whole analytical piece. I'm sitting in a house that I couldn't afford to repurchase today. And I made the decision when I didn't take those last few huge corporate jobs that my house was a house. And it was more important for me to have the freedom to start my own practice than it was for me to earn $1 gazillion, and that if I had to sell my house, I'd sell my house. I mean, that was kind of a choice I made that not everybody can or wants to make, but you have to have a tough conversation with yourself. How much time are you going to be out there? And what's your strategic plan? Where do you want to be in a year from now, 3 years from now, and 5 years from now? And for some people, it might be, I keep my current job 8 hours a day, and I do this at night and on the weekends. And then within a year from now, I want to go part-time with my job and part-time with coaching. I mean, everybody's different in that sense, but it's important to have a plan. And again, as I said earlier, I'm a big one for plan the work and then work the plan, whatever it is.
Procrastination is not going to work in this situation.
No, and I learned something because, by the way, when I'm
talking, so don't get me. Sorry to interrupt you. Do not get me wrong on the procrastination. What I'm trying to say is okay, without having a plan, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the next year. I'm gonna do that next year. I mean, I'm gonna make that my, New Year resolution. And I definitely want to go at 2025, 2026. When 2025 is gone, okay, have you done it? No. oh, you know what? I'm going to make another year resolution and then try to get that in 2026. That's what the procrastination I'm talking about here.
Okay. For me,
Yeah.
having worked with people like me along my career, somebody who started his own business told me something that made sense. And it took away some of the fear. So the goal was instead of saying I'm going to talk with 3 or 4 hot prospects today, his goal was every day call 10 people. And when you think about that, it was just strictly numbers. I called 10 people. Tomorrow I called 10 people. Tomorrow I called 10 people. Well, after a week, you've called 70 people, and some of those people will respond. And so I call that redefining success. So it was kind of a numbers game. And so when you talk about the procrastination, it made me think of that, because people will procrastinate because they're fearful they're not going to achieve their goal. But if you change your goal from I'm going to talk to 3 people who said on LinkedIn they want to hire somebody, as an example, to I'm going to reach out to 10 people on LinkedIn who have jobs that might be in search of a coach. I mean, so you've kind of switched what success looks like, or your goal, so you feel good about having achieved that goal. So that's part of the procrastination, because people are fearful that they're going to get a no. Well, you're going to get a hell of a lot more no's than yeses. Excuse my cussing. But that's okay.
Yeah, at
some point it's numbers games.
Yeah, as long as you have a goal and you're marching towards that goal, meaning like, every single day you're doing something to get there. That's where it matters, right? I mean, just by sitting on a couch, watching a TV, just saying like, yeah, I mean, like next month, that kind of thing. That next month will never come. That's what the next month is all
You're
about.
Absolutely right.
So
I mean, I think this. I was going to say, I think this even goes back to before you decide you want to be a coach, is understanding that, manna from heaven, the sky just doesn't open up and you have clients. You have to work it. And are you willing to do that? And if the answer is no, then maybe going and that upfront expenditure to become a certified coach isn't for you. I think it's really about, do I have what it takes to do the marketing, the sales, the delivery, and the follow-up? Most people want to do the delivery. I can't tell you the number of people who would say to me, and they still say to me, oh, I'd really like to do a strategic plan. So how about next time you get one, I'll work with you. I flipped it on them and said, yeah, happy to work with you. When you get a client, you call me. So they're not wanting to put the work in. I've always been a networker. Can't even tell you. I joined Pasadena Rotary. Why did I join Pasadena Rotary? Well, my father was a Rotarian and my brother didn't want to join. And so I joined. And the amount of people I met who got to know me over time, from whom I've had business, is astonishing. And it's mostly because they know me under that model of know, like, trust, refer. Because trust me, I'm a change agent and most of them are not. But because they feel comfortable with me and they trust me, they hire me to do work. So that is, I've been in Rotary for a while now. So that's a multi-year process. So it's, what groups can you join? Who can you talk to? But one thing you can't do is join a group and within a month expect referrals. That's not going to happen, because you've got to build the relationship. Right. So you have to plan for that. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, whenever we talk about the change, change management is the biggest topic for me as well. Whenever we talk about the change, transformation is a change as well. So whenever we talk about this change, I always think of John Kotter, right? Leading Change. I don't know if you read that book or no. So the first point that he talks about that is, I think he has about 8, different way of, like, if you follow that, the change will, there's a possibility that the change can really takes place. So the first thing he talks about is the sense of urgency, So whether or not it's urgent for you to go into that career or no, because if you do not have that drive just by other people talking about it, if you are taking that on, it's very hard for you to become successful because it's not your intent, it's somebody else's intent poured on you, and you're trying to get that intent out from you, right? So that intent should be yours for you to thrive in this industry. And I'm telling you, there are more than 100,000 people out there who are looking to become a coach, but at the same time, it's really not for everybody. So really have to know yourself. Do that 360 in you first to make sure that you are the right person for that particular job. Otherwise, it's going to be.
Yeah. Then you also have to have a brand. What do you have to offer? People out there have things to offer that I can't offer. So how do you then market yourself? A good friend of mine who's very aligned with spiritualism and teachers, etc., she does a lot of one-on-one kind of a hybrid spiritual coaching and personal transformation. And she thinks of it as a chrysalis, of a worm changing to a beautiful butterfly. And because she's been out there doing that and she's involved in these groups, she has a thriving practice. That's a different practice from the one I have. And I bet a different practice from the one you have as well. So part of it is, as you point out, knowing yourself, what motivates you, what drives you, what do you have to offer that distinguishes you from all these other people that you just got certificates with?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. Now let's talk a little bit more about this coaching itself. What are the misconceptions that you have witnessed in your career as being a coach?
That's an excellent question. I think that it's kind of tied to what we've just been talking about. People kind of view it as a problem solver as opposed to an empowerer. Right. So for me, it's about, kind of bringing someone or helping them along to that aha moment where they have that recognition. The only person I can change is me.
Yeah.
The only person you can change is you. So I think there's this notion that there's kind of a quick fix and that the other person does it to the person. No, to me, it's about the individual. And because I would say 99% of my coaching clients come from organizations that reach out to me. Mm-hmm. They didn't necessarily ask to be coached. So part of the process is explaining to them, as I think I said earlier, it's not what you do is not inherently right or wrong or good or bad. It's just in the environment here to be successful. This is what they're expecting of you. And then I say, you are free to decide you don't want to do it. If you don't want to do it, this probably isn't the place for you to work.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of plain. So I'm big on putting the responsibility where it lies. I'm here to help you. I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to give ideas and suggestions and to give you homework and to hold you accountable for that. But ultimately, you got to want it. You have to decide that it's important enough for you to be here. And then, the reality is, again, in my situation, we all have a scale of what's keeping me here, what's causing me to go. And that's very personal. I mean, people stay in positions because it's compatible with their family life. They stay in positions because of money. They stay in positions because of the perks. I mean, everybody has their own list of things. And so when one comes in as a coach, it's tapping into that. So I think, again, the misconception is I'm the coach. I'm going to, I'm manna from heaven, or I'm, Abraham with the 10 commandments, and I'm going to give them to you and you're going to follow them. And to me, that's not it. It's about unlocking the key of who that person is and helping them to see that what you're there to do is helpful for them. They just ultimately have to be receptive. So I think that's a misconception. I also think just the title of being a coach has cachet for some people. So they're more interested in the trappings of it than in the actual doing of it, if that makes sense. So that to me would be the misconceptions. I'm sure there's a gazillion more, but those are the ones that come to my mind.
And Diana, I believe part of the reason this podcast exists is because this podcast is very successful in bringing out the seasoned coaches as a guests into our show, where we'll be talking to them about these kind of misconceptions so that our listeners are able to understand what are these misconceptions that exist in the world of coaching. And with that thought, we're coming towards the end of this conversation. Do you have any final thoughts you want to talk about?
Well, I love conversations. For me, it's about continuous learning. I've learned something in talking to you, and sometimes articulating my own ideas that are in my head but not out of my mouth. I'm shifting directions somewhat. I mean, I am coaching and I do a lot of facilitation. One thing I'm really trying to unload is my HR practice. And the reason is I like to be in the positive space and not in the negative space. And I still have people calling up and saying, help me fire so-and-so. And then I'll say, have you done this? Have you done that? Have you done the other thing? So I really like being with people who are transforming and they need some assistance with that. I've also moved into the space of writing. I've written 2 Amazon #1 bestsellers, and the recent book just won a Goody Business Book Award in leadership.
What's it called?
It's called Can We All Just Get Along? Rodney King and Courageous Communication.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Into civility. And this one is really focused on these kind of unusual times in which we live when people seem to be polarized, and how can we bridge the divide and get back together. So I've been doing a lot of conflict management training as opposed to conflict resolution. You can resolve conflicts if it's like you and I both asked for vacation on the same date and the policy is you get it because you asked before I did. That you can resolve. But most conflicts these days are based on values, history, beliefs, culture. And so it's more about how do you manage to the win-win. So I enjoy doing that. I enjoy taking my umpty-ump years of experience and observation and putting together sessions that are kind of tailor-made to each organization, but help them achieve their goal. I always ask somebody at the beginning of an assignment, what does success look like? This will have been a successful coaching or training or a strategic plan if what happens. And then I turn around and say, okay, this is a two-way street. What are you willing to do to make sure it happens? So it's an interactive process. I love that. I love the give and take. So I would say that this part of the journey for me is about impacting people both with written word and with one-on-one or group situations.
Thank you so much for all the insight that you have provided. I really enjoyed our conversation. You have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.
That was Diana Peterson-More in a conversation with Prabin Sharma at Inside Ignite Coaching Voices podcast. You can contact Diana at dianapetersonmore.com.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Coaching Voices podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights into the world of coaching and leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps others find the show and supports us in continuing to bring you inspiring content. Do not forget to share this episode with anyone you think might benefit from the discussion. And if you're looking to explore coaching further or have any questions, please feel free to connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing, keep leading, and stay curious.